don't look at them as iconic characters. I mean, they refer to them as that if they become that. You're just doing you're on a day-to-day running it, having a good time and trying to make it work.
Kurt Russell spent more than half a century in the spotlight. But the decision that defined his life happened away from movie sets and red carpets. While Hollywood kept offering bigger opportunities, Russell kept making choices that pulled him in a different direction. Years later, he says those choices mattered far more than fame, money, or career success ever could. So, what was so important that Kurt Russell was willing to put distance between himself and Hollywood? And why does he believe that decision still holds the most important lesson of his life? Join us as we find out what Kurt Russell is finally exposing about Hollywood. The boy who had already lived 3 lives. Kurt Russell's first Hollywood job was kicking Elvis Presley in the shin. At 11 years old, he landed a small, uncredited role in the 1963 film It Happened at the World's Fair. His role was to run up, kick Elvis's character, and leave the scene. That same year, he landed the title role in The Travels of Jamie McFeeters, an ABC Western that ran for 1 season, 26 episodes, alongside Charles Bronson. Kurt was the lead, carrying an hour-long network drama at age 12. From there, the work kept coming. Guest spots on The Fugitive, The Virginian, Gilligan's Island, Lost in Space. By the late 1960s, Walt Disney himself had signed him to a 10-year contract. According to Turner Classic Movies historian Robert Osborne, Kurt became Disney's top star of the entire decade. He led a run of comedies: Follow Me, Boys, The Computer Wore Tennis Shoes, Now You See Him, Now You Don't, Super Dad, that kept him working constantly through his teens and into his 20s. These were broad family comedies, light, physical, built around a likable young lead. And Kurt was exactly what Disney needed. A kid who could carry a film without overshadowing it. But acting wasn't the only thing Kurt was doing. While making Disney movies, he also played professional baseball. He'd started as a teenager, developing into a switch-hitting second baseman, good enough that by the early 1970s, the minor leagues weren't a detour. They were a genuine second path. In 1971, he joined the Bend Rainbows, a California Angels affiliate, as a switch-hitting second baseman. The following year, he moved to the Walla Walla Islanders. By 1973, he'd been promoted to Double-A, playing for the El Paso Sun Kings. In his first 6 games at that level, he hit .563. Scouts were paying attention. For a brief stretch, it looked like Kurt Russell might end up known for baseball, not movies. Then, early in that 1973 season, it ended in one play. Turning a double play at second base, an incoming runner slid in high and collided with him, tearing the rotator cuff in his throwing arm. Kurt said the pain in his arm was bad, and it didn't go away. He went on the disabled list, the timeline got extended, and within days, the Sun Kings released him. Kurt's father was Bing Russell, a working actor himself, best known as Deputy Clem Foster on Bonanza, and a man serious enough about baseball that he would later buy and run his own minor league team, the Portland Mavericks. Even though his father owned part of the team, it didn't matter. The injury ended his baseball career on the spot. So by 1973, at 22 years old, Kurt had already burned through more careers than most people attempt in a lifetime. 2 of them were gone before he was old enough to have planned either one. Hollywood had one expectation for an actor in his position: stay close to the people who controlled the work and build the next chapter from inside the city that ran it. 4 years later, at 26, with his Disney contract winding down and his baseball career already over, Kurt made a decision that had nothing to do with either of those careers, and everything to do with something he'd been carrying since long before any of it started. So, what was that decision? And where did it actually come from? He left and never looked back. At 26, Kurt Russell moved to Colorado. On paper, this looked like nothing. No headline, no controversy, just an actor changing addresses. But the timing tells you everything. This was 1977. Kurt's Disney decade was ending. His baseball career had been over for 4 years. He was at the exact point in his career where the smart move, the expected move, the move every agent in town would have pushed for, was to stay in Los Angeles and start building the next chapter close to the people who controlled it. Kurt has talked about that decision many times since, and the explanation never changes. He's said that at a certain point, you find yourself asking whether you're going to live the life you want to live or whether you're just going to talk about it. For Kurt, that wasn't a rhetorical question. He decided to make the move and live the life he wanted to live. To understand what that life actually was, you have to go back to where Kurt grew up. He spent part of his childhood in a log cabin in Maine. That detail isn't trivia. Kurt has connected it directly to everything that came after. He said that he and his longtime partner share a passion for log homes, and that he never got that out of his system, starting with the one he grew up in. The log cabin in Maine wasn't just a place Kurt lived as a kid. It became the template for every home he'd choose for the rest of his life. So when Kurt moved to Colorado at 26, he wasn't experimenting with a new lifestyle. He was returning to the only version of daily life that had ever actually felt like his. Mountains, land, horses, a barn, a fireplace, after spending his entire childhood and 20s inside an industry built around none of those things. This is also the point where the popular version of Kurt's story gets the timeline wrong. Most people know Kurt and Goldie Hawn as a couple who built a ranch together and raised their family there. That's true, but it happened roughly a decade after Kurt first moved to Colorado on his own. Kurt and Goldie started dating in 1983. Their old Snowmass property came together shortly after, while Kurt was filming Swing Shift, the movie that brought them together in the first place. Swing Shift was a wartime drama, directed by Jonathan Demme. Kurt played a musician. Goldie played a woman who takes a factory job after her husband ships out to war. They were on set together for months. By the time filming wrapped, they were a couple. Kurt has described that property since, a large, beautiful log cabin lodge on a ranch, the kind of place that, by his own account, runs on a passion for log homes that traces back to Maine. By the time Goldie was in the picture, Kurt had already been living this way for 6 years. She didn't bring the idea. She brought Oliver, Kate, and eventually Wyatt, and a one-man life on a Colorado ranch became something built for 5 people. And that family grew fast. Kurt and Goldie share one son, Wyatt, born in 1986. Goldie's children from her previous marriage, Kate Hudson and Oliver Hudson, and Kurt's son, Boston, from his first marriage to actress Susan Hubley, whom he met on the set of the 1979 Elvis TV movie, all became part of a household that moved between Los Angeles and a Colorado ranch that, by now, has been in the family for over 40 years. So Kurt built the life he wanted at 26, and a decade later turned it into a life for an entire family. But his career was still based in Los Angeles, in an industry that had very specific ideas about what an actor at his level was supposed to do and where he was supposed to do it. What happened when those two worlds collided? The career that kept going. Anyway, here's where Kurt's story stops being about a personal choice and starts being about what that choice actually cost him, or didn't. Through the late 1970s and into the 1980s, while Kurt was splitting his life between Los Angeles and Colorado, his career didn't slow down. It accelerated. He teamed up with director John Carpenter for a run of films that became genre touchstones, Escape from New York in 1981, The Thing in 1982, Big Trouble in Little China in 1986. In 1983, he starred in Silkwood, alongside Meryl Streep and Cher, earning a Golden Globe nomination. In 1979, he played Elvis Presley in the TV movie Elvis, the same Elvis Presley whose shin he'd kicked as an 11-year-old extra 16 years earlier, and the performance earned him an Emmy nomination. None of this happened because Kurt stayed quiet about where he was living. He's been direct about it. His business was still primarily based out of Los Angeles, so his life became a back-and-forth Colorado and LA repeatedly for decades. He said he enjoyed his life the way he wanted to live it, and he was still able to do 1990s business. He made both things work at the same time. The momentum never really stopped. The 1990s brought Tombstone, where Kurt played Wyatt Earp, and Stargate, which became its own franchise. Backdraft came in 1991. That same year, he starred opposite William Baldwin and Scott Glenn in a film about Chicago firefighters that grossed over $150 million worldwide. It was the kind of mainstream commercial hit that proved Kurt could anchor a studio blockbuster just as comfortably as a John Carpenter cult film. And he was doing it while spending half his life on a ranch in Colorado. Decades later, The Hateful Eight in 2015 marked his first collaboration with Quentin Tarantino. Kurt played John Ruth, a bounty hunter transporting a prisoner across a snowbound Wyoming, in an ensemble that included Samuel L. Jackson, Jennifer Jason Leigh, and Walton Goggins. He joined the Fast and Furious franchise and Guardians of the Galaxy in the 2010s, putting him in two of the biggest box office franchises in the world well into his 60s. And now, at 75, Kurt is the lead of Taylor Sheridan's The Madison, opposite Michelle Pfeiffer. The last time they'd shared a screen was in the 1988 thriller Tequila Sunrise, nearly 4 decades earlier. The show, which premiered on Paramount Plus in March 2026, follows a New York family relocating to Montana after a tragedy. Kurt plays Preston Clyburn, the family patriarch. Preston is a man rooted in land, in legacy, in the kind of stubborn attachment to place that doesn't soften with age. For an actor who has spent 50 years splitting his life between a city and a ranch, it's not a stretch. Getting Kurt into that role wasn't simple. He was already committed to Apple's Monarch, Legacy of Monsters, and the timelines overlapped directly. Rather than recast the part, the production restructured an entire season around him. Pfeiffer and Sheridan worked out a plan with Paramount to film Kurt's Season 1 scenes at the same time as Season 2, shooting his Season 1 footage a full year after the rest of Season 1 had already wrapped. 2 seasons, filmed out of sequence, specifically to keep Kurt in the role. That's the clearest evidence available that Kurt's decision at 26 never cost him anything professionally. Paramount didn't restructure 2 seasons of a Taylor Sheridan production because Kurt Russell was easy to replace. They did it because, at 75, he was still the name they wanted on the poster. So Kurt kept the career, kept the ranch, and never had to choose between them in any permanent way. The only thing he couldn't keep in equal measure was time, and that's the part he's still negotiating at 75. So why, in interviews tied to the biggest show of his career, does Kurt sound like there's still something he hasn't gotten enough of? The wildfire that changed the math. For most of the last 50 years, Kurt's life between Los Angeles and Colorado was a balance, work pulling him one way, the ranch pulling him the other, with both sides holding steady. In 2025, that balance shifted, and it shifted because of something that had nothing to do with Kurt's career at all. In January 2025, wildfires swept through the Los Angeles area. Wyatt Russell, Kurt and Goldie's son, an actor known for Lodge 49 and his role in the Marvel series The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and his wife, actress Meredith Hagner, decided to leave LA. They relocated their young family, including their 2 sons, to Aspen, Colorado, near the ranch Wyatt grew up on. Meredith later reflected on 2025 in a post describing the move as landing in a pocket of heaven in the mountains on the river, filled with family time, rivers, horses, and watching her husband settle into being a father in their new home. That single decision changed the shape of the entire family. Wyatt, Meredith, and their 2 sons now live in the Colorado house full-time, effectively making it the family's headquarters. Kurt has confirmed this directly. Wyatt and Meredith and their 2 boys live in Colorado now, so he and Goldie like to spend as much time there as they can. This is the detail that changes everything about how this story ends. For decades, Colorado was Kurt's chosen life, but Los Angeles was still where the work, and often the rest of the family, was based. The wildfires changed that arithmetic in a matter of days. Wyatt and Meredith didn't take time to weigh it up. They packed up 2 young boys and moved to Aspen, a few miles from the ranch Wyatt grew up on. And they haven't looked back. Kurt and Goldie still own property in Los Angeles, New York, and Palm Desert. They're not walking away from any of it. But when Kurt talks now about wanting more time in Colorado, he's not describing a nostalgic return to a place he loves. He's describing the place where his grandchildren are learning to ride horses on the same land he saddled up on 30 years before they were born. 50 years ago, Kurt made a decision alone, at 26, about where he wanted his life to be based. Today, his son made a version of that same decision, in the aftermath of a wildfire that pushed an entire family to choose between rebuilding in Los Angeles and starting over somewhere else. They chose the same place Kurt chose 50 years earlier, and for reasons that weren't entirely different. So if the next generation just made the same choice Kurt made, what does Kurt himself say he wants now? At 75, watching his grandchildren grow up in the exact place he ran toward when he was 26. 50 years, the same answer. By any measure Hollywood uses, Kurt Russell got everything. The career never stopped. 60-plus films across 7 decades, from a child actor kicking Elvis in the shin to leading a primetime drama at 75. The ranch never went away, over 40 years in the family, now home to his son and grandchildren as well. And the industry, instead of punishing him for splitting his life between 2 places, restructured an entire television season to keep him working. And yet, when Kurt talks about Colorado now, in interviews tied to the biggest show of his career, he doesn't sound like a man checking a box he already checked. Of the multiple properties he and Goldie own in Los Angeles, New York, Palm Desert, and Colorado, he's named one as his favorite without hesitation: Old Snowmass. He describes it as waking up in bed each morning and looking at the mountains out back, heading down to the barn, saddling a horse, riding, sitting in front of the living room fireplace and zoning out. These aren't things Kurt does between projects. These are the things he says he wants more of. And when he's been asked directly why, his answer hasn't changed in 50 years. He said there's a different kind of life there. That's primarily it. He said he'd like to be able to spend as much time there as possible. That's the same answer Kurt gave at 26, just compressed. At 26, the question was whether to build that life at all. At 75, the question is how much of it he actually gets to live, now that everything else, the career, the family, the ranch itself, is already exactly where he wanted it. There's also a detail that makes this moment different from every other point in the last 50 years. For most of Kurt's life, the pull to the outdoors was his alone. a personal preference he had to defend, negotiate around, and build a career despite. Now, Wyatt is raising his sons on that same ranch, in the same mountains, and nobody is asking him to justify it either. The choice Kurt made alone at 26 is, one generation later, just the way this family lives. So, the decision Kurt made alone at 26 didn't just hold up for 50 years. It became the blueprint his own son followed, under very different circumstances, nearly half a century later. And now Kurt, at 75, with the Madison on Paramount Plus and his grandchildren on the ranch he built, is still saying what he's always said. He'd like more of that life. Not instead of the career. He never wanted to give up either one. He built a career that proved you shouldn't have to. 50 years ago, Kurt Russell asked himself one question and acted on the answer immediately. Today, at 75, surrounded by everything that decision built, he's still asking it. When will it ever be enough for Kurt? When the people closest to him end up making the same choices he did, is that proof he was right, or proof that he was the reason? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.